So this is diabetes prevention class. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means. I think it was Jerry last time that said, you know, what is diabetes? And that's what we're going to delve into today. This is just a reminder that we'll have every week to make sure if you have not logged your weight and your activity in the app, just make sure that you give it to Tammy each and every week, because it is something that we track. Because again, we want to, activity and weight are two indicators for us on how the program's going. So again, we want to track those every week. You don't have to be responsible for putting them in. Tammy and I will do that for you. So the classes that we're gonna meet every Thursday in May. I mean that should, I know you're thinking, well, that's pretty obvious, but at some point after the first course sessions, we'll start meeting every other week, and then we go to once a month. So again, this is a year-long program, so those new habits that we form, we can reinforce those, so we meet more often in the beginning, and then we kind of space it out. It ends up being it'll end up being 23 sessions for the entire year. So we'll see you next week. So pre-diabetes, the high-risk state for developing diabetes. So you get that diagnosis of, your doctor in passing might say, you have pre-diabetes. So how did we get there? What does that mean? So there's multiple tests that your doctor might run to tell what your levels are. So Jim here was just saying that he gets his A1C every year. Your doctor might do your fasting when he does your blood work. Some doctors do blood work every 3 months. And you might see a glucose number on there. That's your fasting glucose. So that tells us, okay, what was your blood sugar first thing of a morning? We like for that to be less than 100 for normal range. If it's over 126, that's higher than what we want it to be, and that's typically when we say, okay, you are a patient with diabetes. But what about that gray zone? That gray zone is pre-diabetes. Same thing with the glucose, the oral glucose tolerance test. They'll bring you in, they'll have you drink some glucose. It's a sugary drink that's not fun at all, right? And then they wait 2 hours and they check your blood sugar. So again, quote unquote normal is less than 140. If you're over 200, we consider you to be a patient with diabetes. If you fall in that gray zone, we're talking pre-diabetes. Same with A1C. They'll run an A1C sometimes yearly, every 3 months. But this is the chart that we look at. So the A1C reflects the average blood glucose over the past 2 or 3 months. So if we stick your finger with a glucometer right now, that's capillary blood, that's going to tell us what your blood sugar is right this moment. But when we do an A1C, we're looking over a 3-month look back. A red blood cell will live 3 months. So that's the reason why they only, when they check the A1C, they don't check it any more frequently than every 3 months, because if we did, that life cycle of the red blood cell wouldn't have finished. So again, it's looking at your red blood cells and saying, okay, this is what's been going on over the last 3 months. It's not just this point in time, it's what's been going on at average over the last 3 months. So this is kind of a little fun example to think about it. So if your red blood cells, think about them as apples, okay? And we're looking to see how many of those apples are coated with sugar. So how many of them are caramel apples? So if you had 100 apples, so 100 red blood cells you were looking at, and 6 of them were caramel apples, that would tell us that you're at a 6% A1C. Then we would take it back to that chart, and we'd say, okay, at a 6%, your average blood sugar is running about 126. Now, on all the diabetes commercials, you'll hear to achieve an A1C of a 6.5 or less, and I think some of them even say 7. But that's what they're going for, because blood sugar, normal blood sugar, is between 80 and 130. That's what we're shooting for. Now, your blood sugar is not low until you go below 70. But ideally, we want you at 80 to 130, because we don't want you living down in the 70s. That might, you might slip too low too quickly. So 80 to 130 is kind of that ideal blood sugar that we want you to hit. So again, to achieve a 6.5 or less, that would mean that your blood sugar is lower down in that 130 to 80 to 130 range. Okay, so this is one of the charts that we looked at before. So just to summarize, if you get that A1C test, 5.7 and below is considered a normal A1C. And then if you're 5.7 to 6.4, that's pre-diabetic range. And then a 6.5 or above is considered a patient with diabetes. Has everybody had an A1C test done at some point in time?
Oh, yeah. Every time.
Good, excellent.
What is the difference between the A1C and a C-reactive protein quant?
That's a different test.
Yeah, but different test, a
Yes.
different indicator,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, that's measuring something else and not, not for diabetes.
Okay.
Yeah. But, and we can tell, if you've got your labs, Tammy and I'll be happy to talk to you about those too. But again, this is the range that we're trying, 5.7 to 6.4. Now again, you might be, we have patients that are patients with diabetes, but then their A1C gets in such a good range that they fall back down to a 5.7. Does that mean that they're still patients with diabetes?
Yeah.
They are. Once you cross the 6.5 barrier, you're always a patient with diabetes. You're a well-controlled patient with diabetes, but you're always, any of these claims that say we cured diabetes or do this and you'll cure your diabetes, it just doesn't happen that way. It's more of, okay, you can be well-managed, well-controlled, and that means your blood sugars are in that range that we're shooting for, but again, you're still a patient with diabetes. So, but today we're talking about pre-diabetes. So you guys are probably falling in this 5.7 to 6.4 range for your A1C. Has anybody not had an A1C test done? You have not? Okay. And there might be a fasting glucose on your, if you've got lab work, you might have a fasting glucose.
No, it's not fasting, it was just, there's glucose on mine.
On yours, but it wasn't fasting. Okay, yeah. And we can talk to you about your numbers too. All right, so you're going to hear us talk a lot about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, carbs, glucose, all of those things. The reason why carbohydrates are the theme, you know, the star of the show, is because it's carbohydrates that break down, that form glucose in your system. We use glucose for energy. We can't go carbohydrate free. We have to have carbohydrates. Because as you can see, there's carbohydrates. A lot of times when people think diabetes or pre-diabetes, what do we immediately think about? We think about the sugar bowl, right? We think about the cookies, the candies, the breads, all of that stuff. But there's carbohydrates in fruits and vegetables and a lot of good whole food nutrition. And that's what we're going for, is good whole food nutrition. Not empty carbs, but those carbs that bring good nutrition to us. Now, meat, eggs, and cheese are also going to be things that we talk about for good proteins, but they don't have any carbs. So again, we're going to talk a lot about the balance of nutrition. So again, carbohydrates. So you have simple carbs. Those are the sugar bowl. Those are the ones that are very simply broken down in the system, and that's why they're called simple. They're the heavy sugars. And then the complex one, which are starches and fibers. Okay, so the star of our show, our pancreas. Almost everybody has a pancreas. We're going to watch a little video here in a minute, and it talks about the difference between a type 1 diabetic and a type 2 diabetic and a gestational diabetes and all the different things. But all of us, we're trying to prevent type 2 diabetes. So we still have a functioning pancreas. We have a pancreas that still produces some insulin. We're going to talk about what insulin is in a minute. But we have a pancreas that still produces an insulin. It's just maybe not covering all of our needs right now. And we're going to get into insulin resistance at a point too. But there's our pancreas. It's the star of the show because one of its many jobs is that it produces the hormone insulin. And insulin is always drawn as a key because insulin's, one of its jobs is to go to the cell. So if this is the cell, and this is insulin. Its job is to open up the cell so that the glucose molecules in your blood from the food that you've eaten can go into the cell. We use it for energy, we store it as fat for later energy, and the system works well. So just as an example, and I almost didn't use this example because they're saying 17 grams of carbs for a banana. Well, when we do carb counting next week, we're going to find out that bananas are a lot heavier in carbs than that. That must be a half a banana or a very, very, very tiny banana, because the average banana will have 28 grams of carbs, which is a lot. But anyway, this is just for an example to show you a piece of fruit might have 17 grams of carbs versus a piece of bread that's got 43 grams of carbs. And just as an example, obviously, this is going to load your bloodstream with a lot more glucose than a piece of fruit would. All right, so this is going to be a video that kind of ties all that together. Again, we're talking about your pancreas that produces insulin. Insulin's used as a key to open up your cells so the food that you just ate can go into the cells and we use it.
Welcome to the Habit New Lifestyle Modification Program.
Glucose, insulin, and diabetes. We'll start by reviewing some basic facts about diabetes.
More specifically, we'll be learning about glucose and insulin. Glucose is a form of sugar. Glucose is the basic fuel for the cells in your body. Glucose is present in almost every food you eat. You need glucose in your blood, but having too much presents dangers. How much is too much? The clinical definition of diabetes is a blood glucose level of 200 milligrams per deciliter. When there is more glucose than what is needed to power the cells, the extra glucose is stored away in the muscles and the liver for later use. Insulin is what makes this storage possible. Insulin is a hormone produced by the pancreas. Insulin acts as a gatekeeper for glucose storage in the muscles and in the liver. In some people, this storage process does not work. As a result, they have too much glucose in their blood. Too much glucose in your blood leads to diabetes. It can also lead to damage to many critical systems, including the heart, the eyes, the kidneys, and the nerves. Think of glucose storage as governed by a lock and key mechanism. The glucose storage compartment in each muscle and liver cell is locked, with each insulin molecule holding a key. There are two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. In type 1, you don't have any keys, so you can't open the locks. In type 2, you have keys, but the locks don't work. In type 1 diabetes, no keys. The body's immune system destroys the insulin-making cells in the pancreas, so no insulin is made. Type 1 diabetes develops most often in young people. People with type 1 diabetes need insulin injections just before every meal. In type 2 diabetes, the problem is with the locks, the muscles and the liver cells. The pancreas makes insulin, but the muscles and the liver are insensitive to it. Because glucose can't be stored, too much of it remains in the bloodstream. There are several ways to diagnose whether you have diabetes or are at risk for developing diabetes. One way is with the A1C test. The A1C test measures your average blood glucose for the past 2 to 3 months. If your A1C result is between 5.7 and 6.4%, you are pre-diabetic. And if it is 6.5% or higher, you are diabetic. If you are pre-diabetic, you will not definitely develop type 2 diabetes. For some pre-diabetic people, early treatment can actually return blood glucose levels to within normal range. In this series of videos, we will learn about how to manage or prevent diabetes. Watch the next video to learn about the first and most important step in diabetes management, carb counting.
Is everybody clear as to what type 1 diabetes means versus type 2 diabetes versus gestational diabetes? There's a lot of misconception out there about, you know, what is what on those. So with the type 1 diabetes, there's a beta cell in our pancreas, and it doesn't, which what produces the insulin, it doesn't work. So they don't have any insulin. So in order to get food, to get glucose into their cells, they have to take supplemental insulin. Now, you think, okay, well, some type 2s need supplemental insulin. That's because the insulin that their body is producing isn't enough to meet their needs at the time. Because the pancreas tries to keep up, right? It's like, okay, I can still produce insulin. We don't know exactly what causes insulin resistance, but we know that it's heavily related to inactivity, weight gain, different risk factors that cause that insulin resistance to happen. So the pancreas tries to keep up. He's like, okay, I have to do this so we can get glucose into our cells. But over time, it just doesn't work, and our blood sugars start to go up and up. And remember when we had the introduction to this, we said, okay, why do we care if our blood sugar's high? Why do we care if those levels get out of range? And remember, it's because those little glucose molecules that it's running through the whole network of vessels in your body, those are spiky and can do damage. We've got vessels that go from our brain, that feed our eyes, our kidneys, our heart, all of that network of system. And we don't want to get that vascular system damaged from high glucose levels. So we want to keep that blood sugar level down. So that way, you know, you hear about patients with diabetes having eye problems and kidney disease and cardiovascular. That's because their network of vessels gets damaged, and we don't want that. We want to keep that in line. So back to taking supplemental insulin. There's a lot of different ways that we can lower blood sugars, right? So we can take, there's the pill form. There's a lady that dances around the fountain with Jardiance, and her medication works with your kidneys, so you urinate out the extra sugar. There's metformin. Some of you might know somebody that's on metformin. You might be on metformin yourself. Metformin talks to our liver. Our liver stores, as we saw in that video, our liver stores its own form of glucose. And our liver, especially like if we're asleep and not eating and fasting or skip a meal, our liver kind of wakes up and says, well, you know, I don't want my body to starve to death. I'm going to spit out some of my glucose. Well, metformin's job is to keep the liver under control, and metformin says, no, liver, you just hang on to your glucose. We don't need any extra. And that helps keep the blood sugars in line. But taking supplemental insulin used to be the gold star. Now we have the GLP-1s now that are also used a lot. But when we take supplemental insulin, a thing that Tammy and I used to hear in the hospital all the time was, well, I don't want to take supplemental insulin because I might get addicted to it. My pancreas might stop working and stuff like that. But it doesn't work that way. You're helping your pancreas out. It helps to bring those blood sugars back in line quickly, so then we can do our part with diet and exercise to kind of get our eating in control too. So if you're willing to do your part and kind of come at it from that way, hopefully you won't have to be on supplemental insulin forever. But now there's a lot of different factors that come in, you know, age being one of them. Thank goodness that we're all getting older. We're lucky that we are aging. But it's a matter of sometimes different factors like that. We may have to stay on medications longer, because the whole key is, if we're doing our part, if we're exercising, if we're making correct, good food choices to get those blood sugars down. Speaking of the pancreas, since the pancreas is kind of the highlight of the show, our pancreas gives us insulin in two different ways. It gives us a tiny little drip of insulin all day long, and that's to kind of keep our blood sugars more level throughout the day. Our body likes consistency. It likes for our blood sugars to be, right in that consistent range. It doesn't like drastic spikes up and down. So that little drip that our pancreas gives us is just to kind of keep us level. If you were taking supplemental insulin, the type 2 that's taking supplemental insulin, we call that basal insulin. We call that a long-acting insulin because it's just supplementing that little drip. Then when we eat food and our blood sugar starts to go up, and our body senses that, our pancreas will give us a big squirt of insulin to help bring those blood sugars back in range, back where we want it. If you're taking rapid acting insulin or bolus insulin, that is supplementing that big squirt of insulin that your pancreas gives you. So again, there's multiple ways to look at lowering blood sugar, but you guys aren't there yet. Thank goodness. We're at the pre-diabetes. So we're at the level of let's work on diet, let's work on exercise to keep our levels in a range that doesn't then go into the diabetic range. Okay? So what I would like to do, I wanted to keep today short because I know you guys have got another program to go to. But what I would like to do, something that we like to set, and again, we're going to get a weight with Tammy for all of you today because this is kind of our starting point. But something while we're grabbing you for weight, something that I want you to think about. Now I know we haven't gotten too far, but you know that we're going to be talking about diet, we're going to be talking about activity, we're going to be talking about what nutrition we should get, what mixture of nutrition we should be getting. So I want you all to think about a little goal that you could set for yourself. What is something that you know or that you want to change about your daily nutrition intake, your daily activity, the combination of foods, that late night snack that you might want to get rid of? Think about what's something that you want to change, and let's set a mini goal for next week. Is everybody kind of thinking about that? We're going to grab you and we'll take you outside to weigh. We're not going to weigh in front of everybody. I'm going to give you a piece of paper, and that way you can jot down goals for me. And if you need help thinking about a goal, make it something. All goals are better if they're measurable, right? If there's something that we can measure, if there's something that we can say, okay, in the next month I want to do this, so put a time frame on it, or in the next 2 weeks I want to do this, or in the next week I want to try to do this. But let me know if you need some help on thinking of a goal. And again, these are going to be kind of mini goals this time around. Let's think about, evening, I'll pass out some pens here in a minute too. What about, is there an evening snack that that maybe is not the best? Is there, is it more activity that you want to add? And make sure you write your name on these because I'm going to collect them back so we have, so we keep.
You said do write your name on?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Is anybody a vegetarian? Everybody who's a meat eater? Okay. Being meat eaters, it's easier to get your protein. I'm a vegetarian, so it's a little bit, it's a little bit harder to get protein, but yeah. Next week when we talk about carbs and carb counting, the big three, corn, peas, and potatoes, are very starchy. And those are the ones, you can have them, absolutely you can have them, but we really have to watch our serving size because those guys, when we saw that chart on carbohydrates and starches was something that breaks down, so those are our three big starch heavy ones, peas, corn, and potatoes. So those are the ones. A baked potato this size, and not many baked potatoes are that size, but a baked potato this size is 30 grams of carbs. So again, we have to take that into consideration because when you go out to eat, a lot of times the potatoes are big. So it's always a good idea to cut the potato in half and share it or bring half home or something like that. So what other, and you said corn? Corn?
About that size.
Okay, a corn on the cob. Okay, so that's a serving size. So that's going to be about 1/3 of a cup probably. And I wouldn't want you to have any more than 1/3 of a cup of corn.
But that's served lots of times with mashed potatoes.
Yeah, okay, and then mashed potatoes, of course, another one of our very starchy vegetables. So again, we have to be careful. What about fruit? How's the fruit selection?
I'm
not good.
surprised about the
There
bananas.
isn't.
There isn't any.
Right? Because bananas are one of those ones that, you know, we always hear. We have to have bananas for that potassium, you know, but bananas are one of the ones, when we think about women, typically for women, we shoot for between 30 and 45 grams of carbs per meal. Now again, we'll go over this next week. But when we talk about that, we say 30 to 45. Well, when the average banana has, you know, almost 28 grams of carbs, for a woman, that's almost a meal. So again, they're just very carb heavy.
And you know
Very
what,
carb
you
heavy.
think they're nutritious for you.
And they are. They're whole food. They're whole food, so they're good from that standpoint.
Berries
So-
be better.
Berries. Berries are typically more diabetic friendly. So blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries. And again, we're going to be on cherry season soon, so cherries are good. But typically the berries are what we think is more friendly as far as glycemic index, and we'll talk about what that means. But as far as raising your blood sugar, the berries are usually better. There's a lot of good benefits to blueberries. Again, berries are just typically. Does anybody eat grapes?
Well, those are loaded with sugar, aren't they?
Yeah. So when you think about grapes, you can pretty much, how do we eat grapes? We pull off a bunch of grapes and we just kind of mindlessly eat the bunch of grapes, right? We don't really measure them per se, we just pull off a bunch. Well, you can pretty much, now there's a lot of different varieties of grapes, but a good rule of thumb for grapes is 1 grape is 1 gram of carb. So again, you got to remember that when you're popping them in your mouth, that's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Yeah, but count out 15. 15 grapes is a great snack, because when we talk about, you know, 30 to 45 grams per meal, we're also saying there's a morning snack you can have and an afternoon snack. So 15 grapes makes a great snack. Then we're also going to talk about dressing our carbs. Because when we just have a straight carb, our blood sugar tends to do this. And Joyce probably is thinking, yeah, I know, she knows exactly. When you wear a CGM, you can tell exactly what foods cause your blood sugar to spike. But if you mix them with a protein, it makes it more of a rounded raise. So again, because it's harder for our body to break down proteins, so if we mix, you know, if we have a peanut butter and cracker, or if we have, you know, some carb with a protein with our carb, it makes that spike not so drastic. Has anybody ever experienced low blood sugar? What you felt low blood sugar? Yeah, the back row has felt low blood sugar. Yeah, that can be very, you feel shaky, you feel kind of, you know, that kind of just
Wiped out.
Yeah, wiped out feeling. You can be disoriented, you know, just that crashing. Anger is a good one. And the other thing too is, unfortunately, those symptoms can also mean really high blood sugar too. So again, when in drought, treat it as a low, but
Somebody else out there
it
besides
can be
her.
high blood sugar too.
Yes, Sue just went out.
Pardon?
Oh, Sue just went out. You can go
Yeah.
on out.
Is she the only one out there now?
I think she's the only one. I don't know.
No,
We might
there's
have
somebody
several
else.
out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll wait till somebody comes back.
Does anybody have any other like short-term goals that they wanna share that we can make sure we have on the docket?
I had to try to eat 2 vegetables a day.
I love that. I love that. Because again, we're also trying, not only are we watching what carbs we eat, but we're also trying to get a lot of good fiber in our diet. And where do we get a lot of natural fiber in our diet? From vegetables. So again, so they have corn, they have potatoes. Do we ever get like broccoli?
We do
Okay.
get broccoli,
Broccoli
and
is
green
good.
beans, once in a blue moon.
Okay, and green beans are a great choice. A great choice. They're
They
low in
serve
carb.
a lot of collard greens,
What a sweet potato.
which is.
So a sweet potato is kind of like a potato,
Yes.
just a different. What I like to do with those type of vegetables is like roast them. Now you think, okay, a sweet potato is one of those starchy, dense vegetables. But if you mix a little sweet potato, like cube up some sweet potato, mix it with your other vegetables, you get that nice burst of flavor that you get with a sweet potato. So again, good flavor in a sweet potato. But now again, think about this though. We're talking about those are good whole food nutrition. That's what we're shooting for, right? Is we're trying to get good whole food nutrition. We're trying to keep less processed food out of our diet and more whole food. We're really kind of working on an 80-20 here. 80% whole good nutrition and 20% of those processed foods, you know, that are just delicious.
Yes.
So, is anybody a potato chip lover in here?
Yeah. Oh, Lord.
I am too. I think, was it this group that I said if I was going to be sent to a deserted island, I would have a bag of potato chips with me?
Yeah.
I love potato chips, and there's nothing wrong with having a potato chip now and then. I would rather, if you have, what? Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
we're gonna look at the serving size. So if you see the serving size, and we're gonna count out a serving size, and that's what we're gonna have, and we're gonna put the bag away. Because if you're like me and you keep the bag next to you, you're gonna be at the bottom of the bag very quickly. So again, we're gonna talk serving size. I would much rather, if you have that itch to have a potato chip, I'd much rather you have it. You don't get to see her number. I would much rather you. I would much rather you satisfy that urge and have a measured portion of potato chips rather than say, well, I'm going to have this and I'm going to have, oh, I still have that craving and I'm going to have this and I'm going to have that. So again, it's just about serving size. There's very, very, very few things that Tammy and I will say you absolutely cannot have. But we do have to watch serving size. The thing that I would rather you not do is have carbohydrates in your drinks. I would much rather you have an orange and get the good fiber than drink orange juice. I would much rather you eat an apple and have all the good whole food nutrition than drink apple juice. Because when you drink 4 ounces of juice, that's 15 grams of carbs right there, and it's just basically pure sugar, and it's going to spike your blood sugar. We use juice as hypo as when your blood sugar's too low to bring you up. So you can imagine if your blood sugar's not low and you just have juice with your, you know, if you have juice with your morning breakfast, all it's doing is just raising your blood sugar. The vitamin C that you can get in other things will match the vitamin C you're missing out on in heavy juice.
What about cream?
So there's a lot of low carb creamers that you can get. Those are okay. I mean, if a cup of coffee is not going to hurt you, and if you put a little, you know, splash. But something to remember that a lot of people forget is that milk does have carbs in it. A cup of milk is going to have 12 grams of carbs. So when you think about that, just remember, milk has carbs. Liquids have carbs. A lot of people will be like, oh, you want me to keep track of my drinks too? My drinks are, yes, your drinks add a lot of carbs if you don't, you know, if you're not careful to your meal.
Well, now, does that vary with like 4%, 2%, 1%?
That's the fat level. So typically not. The carb's going to stay the same, but the fat, we want you to drink as low fat as possible because, again, fat's important. So we're going to get to fat levels. We're not going to count fat per se, but we're going to learn how to look at the label, and the percentage of fat on that label kind of gives us an indicator of whether it's a product that we can enjoy or whether it's a product that we shouldn't have as often. Does anybody drink regular soda?
Once in a while.
Once in a while. I'd like for you not to, because again, it doesn't bring any nutrition to the table, and you're just getting empty carbs. Now, as Tammy let it slip that I'm a Diet Coke drinker. I try not to drink a lot of it, but when I want a soda, I have a Diet Coke. Water, obviously, is great.
How about Crystal Light?
Crystal Light is fine, no problem at all. Those Mio drops, there's a lot of different flavors of the little drops that you can put in your water. Those don't have any carbs in them. So again, all of those, because drinking water all the time can get kind of boring. I get that. So if you want to, you know, if you want to add some flavoring to your water, you know, there's no problem at all with that. Just make sure that when you look at that nutrition label, that carbohydrate line, and again, we're going to really delve into a nutrition label next time, but just make sure that it's zero carbohydrates. Because a lot of times, labels can be tricky. They'll put across the front of the box a lot of different things to get you to pick up that product and use it.
Iced tea?
Iced tea, unsweetened.
Right.
Yeah, unsweetened. You can have a artificial sweetener for it if you prefer the blue packet, the pink packet, or whatever.
Well, I was wondering if you even wanted us to be doing that.
Well, that's one of those things that, you know, that's kind of a personal choice, whether you want to buy into, you know, how much of that you want to actually put in your body. It's up to you. It really doesn't, as long as you're not putting sugar in your body, that's all we care about with diabetes land. But if you want to use artificial, obviously stevia is the more natural one, so that would be the first choice.
What is that, yellow stevia?
No, I think it's kind of green.
It's a greeny packet, yeah,
Oh.
green packet. And I think they even have like a stevia,
Liquid?
yeah, they do. And it only takes a tiny bit, I've heard, just a little bitty bit of it. So yeah, if we can keep carbs out of drinks, that helps. Anybody a late night snacker? What'd you like for a late night snack?
Middle of the night.
Middle of the night snacker.
Oh my God.
But I can't sleep. That's
Help put you back to sleep. Okay.
What about coffee?
Coffee's fine, as long as, you know, how many cups a day do you drink?
Probably about 3 to 4.
Okay. Maybe do a decaf for a couple of those, you know, depending on, you know, what kind of heart issues. You know, we don't want to take in a lot of caffeine, but a little caffeine's not going to hurt you. A couple of cups a day is not going to hurt you. Again, you know, if your doctor doesn't care how much caffeine, if your heart's in good shape, it's not a problem. Depending on, now again, we don't want to load coffee with sugar, but coffee in itself is good.
Yeah, what about cantaloupe?
So, when we're looking at our fruits, the berries are up on top, then the grapes are kind of in the middle.
Yep.
Think about cantaloupe and watermelon and honeydew. The leftover syrup is sticky, right? So it's got
Yes.
quite a bit of sugar.
Oh, it is.
That's what, you know, when you go to a restaurant and they offer a fruit cup, believe it or not, a lot of those little bowls of fruit that they bring you will have almost 30 grams of carbs in it, because what do they put in there? They put a lot of melon and they put pineapple. So those are our carb heaviest fruits that they put in the healthy fruit bowl choice. And again, they might put a couple of blueberries on the top, but typically they load it with the melons. And that's where we pick up a lot of carbs on the quote-unquote healthy,
Yeah, that's what
healthy
they do
option.
here.
Yeah.
and pineapple is there.
That's our fruit.
Pineapple is one of the heaviest carb fruits. Yeah.
So tangerines and oranges
Are fine.
Uh-huh.
You get a lot of good fiber.
And apples.
Your average apple and orange, about the size of a tennis ball, bigger, tennis ball a little bit bigger, are going to be about 10 to 12 grams of carbs. So they're a great snack option. Great snack option. Cherries are great. Now, you can have a cup of cherries if you want to have a cup of cherries. Because again, there's a lot of people that really believe in cherries for inflammation too. So cherries are a great option.
Now, you're talking about maraschino cherry.
No. Not happy hour cherries.
You're talking about those
Just Bing cherries.
Bing.
Yeah. When they're in season and they're a decent price at the grocery store, yeah, they're a great option. A lot of good whole food nutrition. All right, you guys have got another event. If you've got your weight in with Tammy, it's great to see new faces, great to see people that were here last week. Again, my card's over there. Send me, I think I emailed almost everybody that was here before, but if you didn't get an email from me, take one of my cards, or take one of Tammy's cards, email us, and if you want to get into the app, we will definitely get you into the app. It is possible. Trust me, it's possible. I know it feels like it's very hard right now, but it is possible. If you don't want to do the app, don't worry about it. We'll get you on the dashboard, and we'll be able to enter your weight and track it that way. So, again, great to see you guys.
I thought you said activity, tracking our activity.
We're going to track activity. So again, we're going to sign you guys up for activity trackers too. So you'll have an activity tracker that'll feed into the app, or you can measure your activity as far as minutes go. If you went for a 15-minute walk, you can put that in the app too. Or you can just tell us, like you can tell Tammy, okay, this is how many minutes of activity I did. Again, we're shooting for around 150 minutes of activity a week. So if you say 5 days a week, I'm going to do 30 minutes of something, there's your 150 minutes. That's just a good target to try to hit to, and again, not even related to diabetes, but motion is lotion. We just got to keep going, just keep moving.